Welcome back. We'll have our final committee meeting of the Bellingham City Council, and that is Committee of the Whole. We have 3 items before us. The first item is a discussion of the 2018 legislative priorities. The City of Bellingham, every year for the last few years, in partnership with Whatcom County and with the Port of Bellingham, advocates for a shared lobbying agenda for the Washington State Legislature. Staff presented a draft legislative agenda 2 weeks ago, I guess. There was some feedback. The current draft in the package has some minor language changes. Mr. Brian Heinrich is here from the Mayor's Office. Have the other jurisdictions seen this version of the agenda?
Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. We've discussed it. They haven't seen it in this form, but I don't anticipate there being any challenges. Just a couple of things to clarify. On the second bullet, under implement infrastructure projects and improvements, we clarified surface water, wastewater, and stormwater. And under criminal justice and social services funding, on the second bullet, added the word affordable. And I did want to let you know that we've had some conversations with the Office of Civil Legal Aid. It's a state agency, so think public defenders. So born out of some discussions with them, and this is not reflected yet, but we would like that first bullet under criminal justice and social services funding to say support funding for criminal and civil justice assistance. So it's a slight change, but it's an important one as well.
Would any council member like to entertain or suggest a motion?
I'll move approval. I'll second it.
Does that include anything with regard to the inclusion of civil legal aid and the first bullet point of criminal justice?
Yep.
Okay. Is that everyone understands it that way? Do you have the exact language again? Repeat how that would read.
Yeah, support funding for criminal and civil justice assistance.
Okay. Kelly?
Yeah, I talked to Jim when he came up here, and we have benefited quite a bit from that office because our delegation was always very supportive of the funding that was going to it in when they had office of one. So I'm glad that you feel comfortable adding that in there because it really does help the justice of our whole system when we have that civil portion in there too. So thank you.
Yeah, for several years I've volunteered with the Law Advocate Street Law Program, where people come in with no income or low income and they get to talk to a lawyer and get some help. And that focuses on civil non-criminal cases. And there's a lot of help that people need to make sure they get justice in this community. And that's it right there. So if a motion before us, we'd be the first jurisdiction to approve legislative agenda as written here. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the legislative agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. We'll send it to our partners.
And just one quick thing. I wanted to clarify my comments from a couple of weeks ago regarding gas tax collections. Dan, you and I were discussing the idea that Whatcom County is a donor county, and I think historically that's true, although in recent years we get about 99 cents back for every dollar. And with the Connecting Washington package from 2015, we would expect that to be even higher than that with the money that will come to the projects for Whatcom County. So in recent years, we've turned the tide, so to speak, but historically, the donor county concept, I think, is still true.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the second item, which is a consideration of an ordinance adopting protections for residential tenants. Following several committee meetings regarding the challenges facing lower-income residential tenants, the Bellingham City Council directed staff to prepare a draft ordinance prohibiting source of income discrimination and also increasing the notice period prior to substantial rent increases and prior to the increased notice period prior to no-fault evictions. There's an attached ordinance in our council for consideration and or further direction to the staff. Gene?
Yes, this came from the Planning Committee. We spent a lot of months discussing this, so I want to move that we send this to a public hearing to have the public listen to our work and go from there.
Second.
We have a motion before us to move the draft ordinance to a public hearing before the end of the year, or
If it's possible.
possible before the end of the year?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of getting the notice out, and
Okay.
usually we allow 10 days, so it wouldn't be this
Okay.
next council meeting.
So we talked about this before. A public hearing is not required. This would be optional
Yep.
because of the
I
significance
just think
of
it's
this.
important we have one.
Dan?
Page 60 of the packet, BMC 611050, city enforcement, civil infraction. There's only one level listed here of fines, and that's not to exceed $500. I'm just, I had gotten some feedback from folks in the housing, the affordable housing community, and the feedback that I received, also based on some comments from the city of Vancouver, that a more ideal ordinance could include graduated fines for repeat offenders to discourage that from happening. And I'm just wondering if there's any precedent that, legal precedent for that.
Yeah, Peter Raffato, City Attorney's Office. So we actually talked about that. I talked about it with Ryan Anderson, who would be the individual that would prosecute this, or someone in the prosecutor's office, but Ryan would be the likely one. In working with code enforcement or planning, whoever that would be.
Questions have come in from few people in terms of how this is interpreted, like the income discrimination. With it, with this, it says you can't discriminate based on certain types of income. But if there are multiple applications that come in for a rental unit, you can't disqualify based on the income, but other factors that are used to decide who gets the apartment still aren't affected. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. As council might recall, earlier discussion talked about a model following the Seattle model, which is you must accept the first qualified application. Our own housing community said that would not be in the public interest, largely because many of the folks who we hope to apply aren't typically the first to apply. Again, I think a pattern might develop of folks who are denied consistently because of, and they happen to have the correlation between their denial and their source of income. And I think that's the long-term approach. You look for those patterns to do, and you go after the folks who
And the other one
follow
had
that.
to do with requirements by many landlords that to get into a place you need first, last, and security deposit. That is not affected by anything in this, is that?
No, what I can say is that, again, is an issue that Seattle pursued. It's currently being litigated.
Right.
In the instance here, an alternative approach has been considered, and that is to work perhaps with folks who in the not-for-profit sector, philanthropics, who might guarantee or develop a fund to compensate. If the risk was reduced for a landlord, there's no need to regulate it. And that seems to be a much more appropriate way to proceed. We think for the most cases, everything will work out fine and you'll be able to collect those dollars you need. In the rare case that it doesn't work, there'll be some guarantee and backstop, and that might provide confidence. Doesn't require a regulatory fix.
Okay, just wanted clarification. I assume that's how it was, but until I heard it from you.
April?
So, well, I wanted to thank our constituents because we did take a lot of time. We went very slow through this process. We had a lot of feedback throughout it, and actually a lot of really impressive positive feedback from our landlord tenant community, which has been really nice. The only thing that I've heard where I wonder how much more we could talk about it or I don't know, parse it out, is that there are stories where somebody has gone to accept a Section 8 voucher, tried to go through the inspection process, and it took 30 days, something ridiculous. Now, talking with the Bellingham Housing Authority, they're about a seven-day turnaround within 1 week. So, you know, that, as John said this morning, that sometimes is like stories that happened 20 years ago that tend to still come forward. The concern with some landlords is there any way we can put something in here where if somebody does, in earnest, go to get that inspection and they end up waiting beyond a certain amount of time, that they can then pursue a different tenant? And I don't know any other community that's done that. I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know. But I can see where that would be a little apprehension, because we are in a very fast turnaround market, and for every day you're not rented, that's money out of the landlord's pocket. Certainly don't want to see anybody trying to skew the way they do applications and things just to still avoid this. I want them to feel the security, and they can go in this process and get an inspection done, but it's going to be done in a timely manner, or they're not bound by that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Peter Raffato. So in the source of income discrimination on page 60 in the exceptions, so 6.11030B, it states that the prohibition does not apply to the use of a Section 8 housing choice voucher or certificate if the rental unit does not qualify for participation according to certain guidelines. And this may include some peculiar things about the lease terms. We could insert something that addresses that in that paragraph that says that there will be an exception if the turnaround time, if the landlord can show that the turnaround time was of a certain length and time.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear more from council, but that is really the major feedback I've gotten from landlords. It's not, no, we don't want to do this, no, it's going to cost more. It's just, how am I going to deal with this when, you know, I have about 20 days. If I'm willing to accept this person, I enter into this agreement, and now I'm getting really close to that time of needing to fill my spot. And it's been taking longer than it should have, and that should be incentive as well, hopefully, for the Bellingham Housing Authority to get that inspection done. I think what I heard from Bellingham Housing Authority is a week, so I don't know if it's a good opportunity to go back and talk with them and find out what would be a reasonable amount of time, maybe 10 days, if 7 days is when they think they're getting it done. But just enough time that somebody can also then go pursue another tenant if it's going to, because we do already know that if you take that time and then your house doesn't qualify, you still got to go out and get another tenant. So I guess I'd like to hear from you all, and have you gotten that same feedback, and do you think it's fair or reasonable?
Well, I did receive some of the same feedback. I don't know from the same person, but the scenarios explained to me is, here's someone, they're income qualified, I don't want to discriminate, but if I have to wait an entire month and an election cycle for an inspection, which may or may not go through, but let's just even assume in the best cases it goes through, that's still a month. So, yeah, maybe an exception where if for some reason an inspection doesn't occur in a timely fashion, it sort of releases the, and then it's not discriminating against the tenant for their source of income. It's really just saying if there are, I'll call them bureaucratic, it's kind of negative. If there are bureaucratic things in the way, that becomes a legitimate reason that you're asking me to forego income for a reason unrelated to the source of income, but related to bureaucratic hurdles. I don't know what a reasonable delay would be, 2 weeks, a week, a month. I don't know what a reasonable delay would be. Terry?
Yeah, I've heard that in talking with a few different people, that concern about that. I think right now, if we move this forward, this isn't saying that we're approving anything in this. We're just approving this to go to the public hearing. And my guess is at that public hearing, we're going to hear a whole lot of input and stuff that maybe from people that weren't in front of your committee and stuff. And then the work will be to take what we hear and then maybe approve it this way, but maybe redraft this to fit what we're hearing. That's the purpose of the public hearing, so that would be my take on it.
Roxanne?
Yeah, I'm with Terry. I'd really rather wait to hear the totality of the feedback before we start amending or thinking about specific language, because I'd love to know the total issues.
I think just what I'd
April?
be asking in that is for people that are watching and people that are involved in this process. If we sometimes we just throw it out there and it's really hard to tell where the council's at on doing things. And I think when we can give a little bit of here's some things that we're wondering about and we'd really like to hear back from you on that. I would say this for me is one of them. What would be a reasonable amount of time? And then of course from the people who are also trying to help with that process and doing those inspections, what do you think is a reasonable time somebody should wait and do that? So I really hope people will come forward during the public hearing, and I'd really like to hear back on that particular issue.
And I'm completely agreeing with April on this. I'd like to signal that is an issue that some of us have heard about, and tell us about that issue. Is our fear misplaced, or is it valid? And if it is valid, how could it be addressed? Peter, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so if I, just to summarize the direction, obviously set a public hearing. We'll leave the ordinance as it is, but I'll maybe mention at some point in the beginning that there's 2 items identified by council that they want to think about more, which is the infraction, graduated infraction, and the issue of a lengthy time to get a Section 8 inspection.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you give those 2 issues a little bit of thought between now and the hearing and include those in your comments. Does that sound appropriate? Dan, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so my understanding is that communities that have a source of income discrimination ordinance on their books have access to a fund, and I don't know if it's a state fund or if it's a federal fund that would provide for damages for a unit that a landlord could access. I'd want to better understand what that looks like, and if this needs to be written in such a way to align with that, then I would want to see what that looks like.
So that'd be a 3rd issue.
Yeah,
April?
and when you do that, Peter, will you go check again? I know the last time we had an update, we were told nobody has used that, but Mark might be in here. We met with a landlord agent for Washington State and had said 3 people have already used that fund, and so I just think it would be a good update to know that it's actually being used, which is good, and that we need a source of income ordinance to even be able for our landlords to go seek that money to help people understand.
Any further discussion? The motion before us is to schedule a public hearing on this ordinance. Also direction to staff and looking into some possible alterations, but bring forward the draft as written with no alterations included. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. We look forward to that hearing. We're going to do things a little bit out of order. We are going to actually break from here for the 3rd item, which is a budget work session, which we have in the City Council chambers, and then our executive session. But before we do that, we'll take care of some more business here. Our regular business includes approval of meeting minutes from October 23rd committee meetings.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion before us to approve the committee meeting minutes from October 23rd. Are there any corrections or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Now we go on to old and new business. I'd like to start up. First of all, I want to publicly thank and acknowledge Gene's 25 years of service in the Bellingham City Council. We surprised him last week. We misled him. Said there was a reason.
Everybody lied.
Oh, no.
to me.
We told him there was some business that we needed to come in, sign some papers, do something, and then we all yelled surprise in the lobby. It was a very nice ceremony, and appropriate to recognize your 25 years of service. More seriously, on October 24th, the Whatcom County Council passed a resolution number 2755, partially in response to actions and requests by this council to look into the issue of homelessness and homeless shelter, and they formed an ad hoc homeless strategies work group. That work group will identify alternative solutions to living unsheltered in Whatcom County and will give priority to solutions that can be initiated to prevent people from having no other options than to sleep outside in cold weather. This is a longer way of saying we're looking at increasing our emergency shelter options. The resolution states that there will be 2 members of the Bellingham City Council to serve on that work group. I know I'm interested in serving on that work group, and I think, Dan, you were interested, but are there any other council members who also might be wanting to work on that work group? Okay. I hereby move to appoint myself and Councilmember Dan Hamill to the county's homeless strategies work group.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion before us to appoint Dan and myself to that work group. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So again, we'll now adjourn to the mayor's boardroom for the third item as a work session on the proposed 2017-2018 biennial budget. The mayor has proposed to staff. We will convene to discuss the proposed budget. The fire department budget is scheduled next. Are there any other departments scheduled to discuss?
That's our last one.
Okay, so, wow, we're coming to the end. So we're going to have probably
Efficient, thank you.
not a terribly, oh no, then come the amendments. We're going to tear this budget.
Yeah, okay.
We will break for that. We will then stay in the mayor's boardroom, and we will then close the meeting and go into executive session. In the executive session, we'll consider two items. Both of them are potential property acquisitions. Both are scheduled for 5 minutes apiece. Is there any further business before? Oh, any old and new business? I'm sorry I didn't open up. Anything on there old and new? Okay, we're going to